Hey guys, Omaha here. Welcome to my ultimate helicopter video for Battlefield 6. I'm going to be going over the attack helicopter and the transport helicopter. I tried to put as many tips as I possibly could in here, and I go over all the weapons and break everything down for you. I will be putting timestamps in the video, so if you want to skip around, feel free to do so. And if you want to learn how to fly a helicopter for an absolute beginner, I have a video that I'll link here at the top. I got a lot of really good feedback on that, and this is kind of like the sequel to that video. So check that out if you haven't. So before we get in, here's a really good portal server you can use to practice helicopters. It has tanks and vehicles on the ground too that you can practice shooting. Experience code is HYQT. And you can host this locally so you don't have to play with other players. Okay, I'm gonna go over my controls really quick. So for the helicopter, we have the buttons on alternate and the sticks on southpaw. It sounds crazy, but I promise you this is like the best you can do. And it's gonna end up looking like this. It says custom because I put the free look button on the right bumper because by default it's a D-pad. And then I moved all the free look actual looking around to the right stick. It's on both sticks by default just so you don't move the aircraft while looking, but I got tired of that and just kind of caved in and put it all on the right stick. And then some other settings I ended up changing. I put the helicopter control sensitivity to 200. By default it's like 100. Didn't notice a massive difference, but I do like the way it feels, so I'm gonna leave it on 200. And then I changed vehicle aim input curve to Battlefield 1, Battlefield 4, just because those are my favorite games to fly in. Battlefield 3 as well, but it wasn't tied into these two. And then this one I think is actually for if you have the throttle and the stick still. So yeah, that probably doesn't matter, but I put it there anyways. My reasoning for running the southpaw is because I like to have, all it does is switches the left and right stick. So I have the pitch and the roll on the left stick and the yaw on the right stick, and that is the only thing the right stick even does besides free look. So I use the right stick for like fine adjustments to my aim, and that's what I use my yaw for, so that's why I did that. And then the alternate button controls are going to put your acceleration and deceleration on the triggers instead of the sticks. In my opinion, you don't want to use the sticks to throttle. You don't want to be throttling your stick while you're flying a helicopter. So that's my explanation for why I'm running those controls. I say highly suggest everybody tries them out. If anything, at least try the alternate buttons. One final thing is I do run inverted vertical flight on the aircraft. That's because I play a lot of flying games and it's default on like every flying game, so I'm just so used to it at this point. That's a total preference thing. You can totally run it off and do just as well. Now when it comes to which class you should play in the helicopters, really there's only one recommendation to give, and that is engineer, but more specifically the combat engineer. This training path is specifically designed to be in vehicles, but with the attack helicopter there's only one perk here that's going to directly benefit being inside the vehicle, and that is the vehicle regeneration perk, which when you're in the vehicle will constantly be regenerating your health as long as you're not in a critical state. So you combine that with emergency repair to get you out of critical state, and then you'll basically never have to go back to base to repair. The other perks aren't bad, but overheat control and thermal overdrive are really only going to benefit you with your repair tool, at least in the attack helicopter. When it comes to the transport helicopter, overheat control is going to increase the amount you can fire the minigun by like double before it overheats. So that is extremely powerful if you're in a gunner seat in the transport helicopter. All right, quick overview of the HUD. Bottom left down there is your speedometer. Really the only reason I would ever use this is when I'm running the missile interference upgrade, which doubles the lock-on time if you're going above a certain speed, and I believe it's 90 kilometers per hour. I'm not 100% sure on that. Let me know down in the comments if I'm wrong on that. Bottom right is going to be your altitude. And the reason you'd want to use this, if you need it, is there's this thing in Battlefield 6 called below radar, where helicopters and jets, if they're below 30 meters, I believe, could also be wrong on that, but I think it's around 30 meters, you cannot be locked onto with any lock-on weapons, any AA or any of that stuff, or AGMs, unless you are painted by the Recon's thermal binoculars or soft land, whatever you want to call that. So most times you won't really need that to know how high you are, but it's kind of useful to have. Middle of your screen there, you've got two crosshairs. You have the regular crosshair, which is used for the aim-guided rockets. That will follow that crosshair. And then that big eye in the middle of your screen is for the light and heavy rockets, because they do not track with your crosshair. That kind of moves along with your momentum, so you can see where they're actually going to hit. And then at the bottom middle, this is actually pretty useful. This shows for both the pilot and the gunner. That top ball up there kind of shows the balance of the aircraft. It's not super useful, that part of it, but the other dot in the middle is going to show the pilot where the gunner is aiming. So if the gunner's calling out enemies, you can just look at that box and see exactly where the gunner's aiming. So it's pretty useful for that. It also lets the gunner know where he's aiming relative to the front of the helicopter if he needs that. And then this line, this dotted line right here, right down the middle, that is called the horizon line, I believe. That basically just tells you if you're level with the ground. So if you want to float level, you just keep your crosshair somewhere around there. If you move your crosshair under the horizon line, you'll go forward. You move it above the horizon line, you're going to start going backwards. Pretty simple. So the attack helicopter has 3 different types of rockets you can use for your primaries. You've got the aim guided, which is what you start with. You've got the light rockets and the heavy rockets. The aim guided will follow your crosshair, with the downside of only having 7 by default, or 12 with the heavy warheads upgrade, which we'll talk about later. They can follow your crosshair even in free look, so you can sit still and look to the left or right and they will follow that. And I'll be honest, once I unlocked the light and heavy rockets, I never went back to these. I didn't see a reason to. The light rockets have the exact same damage as the aim guided, but they don't follow your crosshair and you get a lot more of them. So I found that to be a lot more worth it. And the damage I got for both of these against an M1 Abrams tank in a portal server, keep in mind this can change slightly depending exactly where you hit, is 23 to the front, 39 to the sides, 56 up top, and 66 to the rear. So these aren't very effective against armored targets like the main battle tanks and the infantry fighting vehicles, but they are pretty good against infantry, transport vehicles, and enemy aircraft. So that's going to bring us to the heavy rockets. I would say I use these probably 90% of the time, unless I'm playing Manhattan Bridge, and then I'll use the light rockets. But these do a lot more damage to armored vehicles and pretty much everything else. So to an M1 Abrams, they did 106 damage to the front, 182 to the sides, 250 up top, and 308 to the rear. And this is after Season 1. Before Season 1, they were actually doing more. I happened to take these values beforehand too, and they did 147 to the front, 230 to the sides, 276 up top, and 385 to the rear. So it looks like they nerfed the damage by about 25%, but I still think these are the best rockets in the game right now. So these can one-shot infantry, 1 or 2 shot enemy aircraft. A full volley will almost always take out enemy armored vehicles, especially if you're running heavy warheads where you get a 5th one. And you'll get 4 of these by default and 5 with heavy warheads. So you don't get as many. They're not spammable, but if you're able to hit your shots, these are just way more deadly. Another thing to mention about the aim-guided rockets is it says these are supposed to be able to lock onto laser-designated targets. I haven't been able to get this to work at all. So if they ever get the ability to do that, I think they will be a lot better. I don't know if they'd be as good as the light rockets still, but it's possible that they would be better. Now we move on to the secondary weapons, and you have a whopping 2 options. You've got AA missiles, and you've got the TOW or aim-guided missile. So the AA missiles have a lock-on range up to 800 meters, and it says the laser designation increases this range and also increases the lock-on speed. I only found the lock-on speed to be true. It did not increase the range for me at all after testing this several times. It was always 800 meters or less. And with the AA missiles, you will never one-shot an enemy aircraft with 1 missile unless they are below full HP. It always will take 2. And for that reason, it is my opinion that the better you are at flying the helicopter, the better off you are running the TOW missile. Because the better enemy pilots you're versing, the more the AA missiles become a deterrent and less of something that'll get you kills. Unless you are third partying, you're not going to get a whole lot of kills with the AA missiles against good pilots. So the best strategy for these is normally you lock onto the enemy, bait out their flares, and then you can fire both missiles and take them out. The problem is, if they're not burning their flares on anybody else, you have to acquire the lock-on, and if it's a good pilot, they won't pop their flares until you fire the first missile. So you fire the first missile, they pop their flares, you lock on again, and then you fire your second missile, and you end up not one-shotting them unless they're less than full. So enemy jets will be most likely long gone before you even get the second lock-on, and even if you do hit the second missile, they're going to be long gone, and they'll probably either get the terrain to hit the missile, or they will take the hit, go back to their base, and get more HP. That's why I'd say it's more of a deterrent unless you're third partying. The best strategy you can do with these is to wait for enemies to pop their flares against someone else, and then you can get a free kill by locking on and firing both missiles. So the TOW missile, once you get good enough with this, I would say run this pretty much every single time. At least that's what I do, because it will almost always one-shot all aircraft. And against enemy armored vehicles, I found it to do 224 damage to the front, 298 to the sides, 343 to the top, and 601 to the rear. So it does a lot of damage to armored vehicles, and once you get good enough to hit enemy air vehicles, it's the best option for taking them out because they don't see it coming and it will one-shot them. Now, just like the aim-guided rockets, the aim-guided missile says it can lock on to laser-designated targets. I don't know if this is a text bug where they just forgot to take it out, or if it's just bugged in general and it's supposed to be able to lock on, but in the event it ends up being able to lock on to laser-designated targets, I would never see a reason to run the AA missiles ever again. This would straight up just be better across the board in every situation for me personally. Now moving on to the gunner seat in the helicopter, which is an extremely important role. The gunner has the potential to rack up an absolutely absurd amount of kills with the right pilot. All he just needs to be set up the right way, and he can pretty much take out anything that you can come across on the battlefield. So you have two weapons. The first one is the autocannon. This thing will delete anything in the game besides armor within one burst. So infantry take 2 to 3 rounds. Transport vehicles, helicopters, and jets can all be destroyed with one burst if you hit all the shots, even less than the entire burst. So you get 12 rounds per burst, and you have infinite ammo at your disposal, so you can just fire away at anything. One thing both you and the pilot should be doing is calling out threats to each other. You are able to see a lot of threats that he's not able to see because he's probably focused on flying as well as doing other things. And then he'll probably see things that you're not able to see because you're probably focusing on another target already. But there is that HUD box down there at the bottom middle of your screen, which will show the pilot what you're currently looking at. So that's extremely useful for when you call targets out. He'll know what you're looking at if he knows what the box does. Your second weapon is the AGM missile, and this is probably the best long-range anti-tank weapon in the entire game. It has a range of 800 meters, and it locks on even faster with laser designation, and it can also target air vehicles with laser designation. However, it doesn't actually increase the range of the lock-ons. It's always going to be 800 meters or less, but that's still cross-map on almost every map in the entire game, so it's extremely effective. It does between 500 and 600 damage, according to my testing, to an M1 Abrams, so that's enough to two-shot a tank across map. This is also probably the best weapon for the helicopter at dealing with the enemy anti-air vehicle. Your AGM will actually have around the same or even slightly more range than the AA vehicle will have, but your helicopter also has a maneuverability advantage compared to the AA vehicle, so you can just hide behind terrain, pop up, fire an AGM missile at him, hide again while he tries to lock onto you, pop up, shoot your second one, and he's toast. So that's why the AA vehicle really isn't too big of a threat if you have a gunner that's paying attention, or if you're switch seating yourself and doing it all yourself. But yeah, this AGM missile will, I believe it one-shots every air vehicle in the game too if it's laser designated. And before patch 1, it would actually go through flares as well. I haven't noticed it going through flares anymore, but I also haven't flown a whole lot since update 1. Just a couple quick tips for the gunner seat. You always want to be looking for enemy helicopters especially, and enemy jets. Just always keep an eye out for that in case the pilot doesn't see it and call it out to him. You are the best weapon that the pilot has at taking out enemy air vehicles, like especially the jets and the enemy helicopters. Unless he's cracked on the tow missile, you're able to deal with those really quickly. Secondly, always try to keep an eye out for the enemy AA vehicle, considering you are the best option at taking that out as well. It's going to make your pilot's life a lot easier if the AA vehicle's down. You don't have to worry about lock-ons nearly as much. And then thirdly, if you see a red laser targeting you, that's usually a recon player trying to soft slam you with the laser designator. You definitely want to wipe that out because that's going to give the enemy team a lot more options to take you out, and it's going to make enemy lock-ons a lot faster against your helicopter. So dealing with that's just going to make your pilot's life a lot easier as well, and it's just going to help you guys stay up in the air longer. All right, for your equipment one slot, all you get is flares as of recording this video, and my biggest tip with these is don't panic pop them. If you're getting locked onto, don't pop them until you see the missile actually incoming. And if you don't have any flares at the moment, you always want to be near a piece of cover or terrain that you can use to block a lock-on or a missile. When you have flares and they're off cooldown, you can kind of be a little more risky, but when you don't have flares, you want to be playing it as safe as possible. For your equipment slot 2, you have 2 options. The first one is emergency repair. So this can be activated when you're in a critical state, basically when you're on fire or your health bar down there is low. I think it'll even go a little bit higher than when you're in the red health state. But basically this will get you to around half HP, and it saves you from a lot of things. And combined with the combat engineer perk, which will repair your vehicle if you're not in a critical state, that'll basically keep you full HP throughout the whole game. So it's pretty clutch. The second one is target detection, and this one will auto ping enemy infantry and vehicles in a pretty big radius around you. However, it also supposedly makes you more vulnerable to lock-on weapons while active. Now, I haven't been able to test that to see how much faster or more vulnerable you are, but I find emergency repair to be more valuable to me. Target detection is pretty good, but I don't really have any trouble seeing infantry or vehicles already, but I don't think there's anything wrong with running it if you like it. Okay, next up we have the upgrades. The first one is the radar system. This one is basically useless as far as I'm concerned. It says it enables air and ground radar, detecting vehicles in a larger radius around the helicopter. If you use it with the ground detection system, it increases the range. The radar system is already broken in this game. It doesn't really work, so it's kind of pointless to use this. The next one is heavy warheads. So this increases the blast radius lethality of primary weapon payloads, and it increases your ammo capacity. However, it decreases the aircraft maneuverability. It doesn't increase the actual damage of your primary weapon. Basically, it does the same damage at farther ranges. And the main reason I would use this is for the increased ammo capacity. So like I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the missiles, your heavy warheads will go from 4 to 5, which is pretty nice. The light missiles will go from 12 to like 19, and then your aim guided missiles will go from 7 to 12. So that for me is the main draw of using the heavy warheads. I've used them a little bit here and there, but honestly I don't use them very often because of the downside of diminishing the aircraft maneuverability. If you've flown helicopters in the beta, it kind of feels like that when you're using this, and I don't like that at all. I like my maneuverability, so I don't ever use this very often. Now, I'm not saying it's bad because I have a buddy that uses this pretty much exclusively, and he is really good at the attack helicopter as well. So it's not bad, it's just kind of a preference thing. I don't like the maneuverability of it though, so I avoid it. Interference. This slows the enemy's ability to acquire lock-on and clears your spotted marker sooner. So if you're spotted, that goes away a little sooner. I don't know the exact how fast that is, but that's mostly useful against jets, I would say, because jets rely on that a lot to find you. But this does deactivate if the aircraft travels too slowly. So up on screen, I should have a clip of me using it. The first time it's not working because I'm not moving fast enough, and I get locked on to in about like 1.5 seconds. The second time it is working because I'm moving fast enough, and it's about 3 or 4 seconds. So it can be good if you're constantly moving fast, or if you're literally trying to get away from a missile last second, or a lock-on last second, I should say. But I don't really use it because of the last upgrade, and that last one is improved armor. So this improves armor resistance against most infantry weapons. This is about a 50% decrease in damage dealt to your helicopter.
And this will work on all infantry weapons except for the sniper rifles, as far as I can tell.
And that is absolutely massive. This keeps you alive so much longer. It's so useful on pretty much every map, but I've noticed I don't really have to worry about enemy infantry at all, except for RPGs, obviously. But their main guns, you don't really have to worry about those at all. So switch seating, I don't know if this is the official term, but that is just what I call it. Basically, if you're taking the helicopter by yourself and you don't have a gunner, or you don't want a gunner for some reason, that's just involves switching seats and using both seats a lot of the time. Important thing to remember with this is your helicopter's momentum will continue the way it was right when you switch seats, and it kills the engine, so you only get a limited time, and it actually makes you a little more vulnerable because you can't like dodge anything after you switch to the gunner seat. So just keep that in mind. Ideally, you have a gunner that's good enough to take the gunner seat and you don't have to switch seat, but some people like to switch seat. I pretty much only do this probably like less than 5% of the time because I don't really play this game by myself. So that's about all I have for tips regarding that. Okay, next I'm gonna talk about target priorities.
And before we talk about that, I just want to say before Season 1, the MR missile was an absolute nightmare to go against. I don't know if you guys ever experienced it, but basically it would lock onto you and delete you without telling you you're getting locked onto, as long as you were painted. So if you got painted, you could just instantly die out of nowhere without realizing it. Closest thing I could probably compare it to is if you guys ever got credit card swiped like back in middle school. If you know what I'm talking about, you know it sucks. And it comes out of nowhere, and it basically physically and emotionally traumatizes you. That's the same experience with the MR missile. So thank goodness we don't have to deal with that anymore.
So your number one target priority is going to be the enemy attack helicopter. Whenever he is up, that is who you should be focused on the most for 2 reasons. Number 1, he's probably coming for you because you're probably his number 1 priority. Number 2, he's probably slaughtering all your land vehicles and your infantry. In general, when you are fighting the enemy attack helicopter and the transport, you want to be higher than the other helicopter because that gives your gunner the opportunity to attack them, and your gunner is probably your best weapon against the other helicopter unless you're consistently hitting tow missiles from long range. So the gunner can't aim very high. He kind of can only aim level with where the helicopter is, maybe a little bit higher. So if you're higher than the enemy helicopter, his gunner can't really engage you unless he noses up really hard, and your gunner can hit him all day long. And it only takes 1 full burst with the autocannon on the gunner seat to take out an enemy helicopter if you hit every single shot. Another thing that I mentioned earlier that's really effective is if he's laser painted, you have the gunner shoot his air-to-ground missile on him, and that is a guaranteed kill, basically. Your second priority should be probably the transport helicopter. 1, because it's a mobile spawn beacon for the enemy team, and number 2, the miniguns on that thing are definitely capable of shredding you really quickly. So it's definitely a threat against you, and it's kind of a threat to all of your objectives when you're playing on Conquest and Escalation. And he gets a lot of snipers on rooftops. The transport helicopter is actually really valuable, so it's a good idea to take him out as your second priority. And the same strategy applies, like I said earlier. You want to be higher than him. Your third priority should be enemy land vehicles, the IFVs and the MBTs. Obviously, the heavy missile and the tow combination is really effective at like medium and close range, sometimes even long range if you have enough aim for that. But if you don't use the heavy missile or the tow missile, your gunner's AGM missile is extremely effective at taking out enemy land vehicles because it has a range of 800 meters and it does a lot of damage to them. It probably takes 2 or 3 missiles at most to take them out. So the 800 meters is basically across every single map in the game except probably like Operation Firestorm in Myrick Valley. So without the heavy missiles in tow, your gunner will be getting a majority of the vehicle kills, and it's pretty effective. Now, if they're using the guided munitions on the tank, they're going to be pretty difficult to deal with. Probably your best bet's going to be your gunner's missile, and if they're not using guided tank munitions, then generally higher elevation is going to be better against them because then they won't be able to hit you with their main weapons. So I would say winning Conquest games where the helicopter really comes in clutch is if you can shut down the enemy land vehicles, that can absolutely win you games. So that is probably the most valuable thing the attack helicopter can do for a team. Third priority is going to be infantry, and generally I would say the Stinger missiles aren't too big of a threat once you know what you're doing. They're not really all of that something you should be concerned with as much. Just kind of, you know, use terrain and make sure you have your flares when you're committing into attacks. But other than that, enemy RPGs are probably one of the things I die to the most in this game. The RPG in this game's velocity is extremely fast. You really don't have a lot of lead time and not a lot of drop, so it's actually pretty easy to hit RPG shots against enemy helicopters. So you really want to be careful with that. I've died to the RPG so many times and you almost never see it coming. So that is probably your biggest threat when it comes to infantry. And to avoid that, usually distance is going to be your best bet. I haven't mentioned the AA vehicle yet because it's really not that big of a threat, honestly, in this game. Or at least not as much as you think. Unless the AA user has the second set of ammo, which I think is the best, by the way. If they have that, generally what you want to do is just keep your distance and they won't be able to do a whole lot to you. That's kind of how it is with the other ammo. Usually with the AA, you just want to keep your distance, but the AA isn't nearly as big of a threat as probably the tanks even are. Like, the tanks are probably one of the biggest threats to the helicopter in this game. So AA, generally keep your distance, but you could a lot of the time take them out before they ever take you out. And your lowest priority target that you should be going for is the enemy jets. Now, ideally, your jets are dealing with the enemy jets the whole time, but if they're not, and the enemy jet's harassing you, first of all, I would try to avoid them as much as possible, but if you have to engage them, the best strategies for that are, one, if you're good enough with the tow missile, that's going to be a good thing to hit them with. That'll one-shot them. Number two, as a last resort, if they're strafing straight on, you can go for the missiles and then nose up, and that gives your gunner a really good chance to take them out. Your gunner can actually, if he's pretty accurate, he can actually take out enemy jets relatively easy because they're so squishy. But again, you're relying on your gunner to be able to do that. Or if you're switch seating, you can do it yourself, but that leaves you pretty vulnerable. So your number one thing against enemy jets should be to just try to evade them, but if you have to fight them, those are probably the best strategies. Now moving on to the transport helicopter, you're going to want to fly this thing a lot differently than you would the attack helicopter. The attack helicopter, you're usually better off staying back behind the objectives and shooting people at longer ranges, whereas the transport helicopter, you kind of want to be in the thick of it. You want to fly near the objective or behind the objective because your helicopter is a mobile spawn beacon for the entire team. So one thing on Conquest and Escalation, one thing I would do is fly to flags that are hostile or neutral, so that way your team can constantly be capturing flags. That can completely turn the tide of a game. And then breakthrough on like Firestorm and stuff, I like to fly behind the objective to like vantage points and drop off like assault players or recon players. So that can easily overwhelm the enemy team on defense and help you take objectives that way. Now, the way you drop people off is kind of totally up to you. You can either fly high and you'll be a lot safer from RPGs. However, it does carry the risk of the people jumping out, getting shot down or spotted and hunted down. And you're also more susceptible to AA lock-ons. Whereas if you fly lower, you have a way higher chance of getting RPG'd, but the people you're able to drop off closer to the ground are going to be a lot safer in the long run, and it's kind of just more of a risk to the people in the helicopter in general. So it's kind of just up to you, and kind of just, you kind of have to go off the field the game. There's a lot of games where I'm getting RPG'd too much, so I stay high. A lot of games where there's just AA missiles all the time, so I fly lower and crazier and drop people off on the rooftops. Another thing to bring up is the miniguns on this helicopter should not be slept on. You can easily take out the enemy attack helicopter with a transport helicopter if your gunners are paying attention or they know what they're doing. A lot of the time with a random in a minigun, it's kind of it's like a 60% chance they don't pay attention or notice the attack helicopter, so I end up losing those fights. So I don't typically do it unless the guy is just pretty aware and I can tell he's gonna spot him, or if I have somebody from my party in the minigun. And then don't forget that combat engineer perk will make it so you can fire the minigun twice as long. So if you know ahead of time that you're gonna be in the minigun of the helicopter, definitely run that. One other thing I forgot to mention for the minigun is if you're attacking another helicopter, always try to aim for the pilot seat, because a lot of the time you can actually kill the pilot out of the helicopter before ever destroying it. One thing you really want to pay attention to when you're the pilot of the transport is your HUD down there at the bottom where it shows where people are seated in the helicopter. You want to definitely be flying over objectives or near them if it's entirely full, because people are probably waiting for that. They're probably looking for a good spot to jump out, or they're just sitting back there to repair you. You'll notice that though if they are. You also want to pay attention to where people, what side they're on in terms of like the minigun seats, because you don't want to rely on them to have to switch seats when you're trying to face threats. You want, if like the attack helicopter's on your left, you definitely want to be turning the helicopter around so the right side gunner can attack that threat. I wouldn't rely on randoms to switch seats unless you have somebody in your party in the helicopter and the other seat's unoccupied. And then one final tip for the transport helicopter off the top of my head is if you are switch seating in this thing, be extremely careful, because you have to remember that the whole team can spawn on it, and if you're not in the pilot seat, when somebody spawns on that, they will occupy the pilot seat. And I guarantee 10 times out of 10, they were not expecting to be flying that thing when they chose to spawn on it. And there's a pretty good chance they don't even know how to fly it, so there's a really good chance of you just dying outright. All right, I've got 2 more tips for you. Both are kind of related, and they apply to both the transport and attack helicopter, and I don't know where else to put these, so I put them here. So if you go to your spawn and there's that little airplane symbol, that's kind of like where your air vehicles spawn, that will actually heal you between 1/3 and 1/2 of your HP, and restock all of your ammo. So both pilot weapons and the gunner's AGM missiles. It doesn't resupply the autocannon because it already has infinite ammo, so you don't need it. And then the AA in your base, other than just shooting at enemy air vehicles, it will also target enemy missiles and bombs. So if you're being locked onto, or if there's a missile incoming, a lot of the times they'll actually shoot down the missile before it hits you, so that's really, really good. Just be aware that it's kind of inconsistent. I think it's based on the air radar, and as I mentioned earlier, the air radar doesn't really work all the time. It's kind of bugged, so it probably works, I don't know, maybe like 50% of the time if I just had to ballpark it. So don't expect it to save you every time, but it can save you quite a bit. All right, now we're gonna go over some maneuvers for the helicopter, and before I do, it's important to note that a lot of these maneuvers, you're going to do a lot more in the transport helicopter, and especially the Little Bird helicopter when that comes in Season 2, which according to leaks, it is coming in Season 2, and those guys have been pretty accurate on the leaks so far. That helicopter is basically designed to be flying low, crazy, get in and out quick, get close range, and minigun people down, so that is perfect for that. The attack helicopter, it is still useful for things like, number 1, evading and avoiding missiles and lock-ons. Number 2, same thing, evading and avoiding jets. And probably number 3 is evading and avoiding tow missiles. Tow missiles are really easy to hit when you're high. If you're low and you're flying between buildings, it's the same thing with jets. It's just harder to hit you and keep track of you. And then another thing, it's actually good for sneaking around the map. All right, for these maneuvers, I'm gonna kind of fly through them pretty quick. Sorry, I had to sneak that one in there. But seriously, I'm probably gonna run through each one once. A lot of it's gonna be refresher from the basic video that I did, but there's going to be some other ones in here. So your basic turn is going to be primarily yaw and then a little bit of pitch. This is the safest turn you can do because you're not really going to lose any altitude doing it, and I still use this a lot. It's still really useful to do, and you kind of do different variations of it as you're turning around the map. The next one after that is going to be like a bank turn, and this is going to turn you sharper. So you're going to roll into the turn and yaw the same direction, and that will, a lot of the time, bring you lower to the ground unless you bring your crosshair up near the horizon line or higher. And that'll also kind of lead into a J turn, where you just basically keep doing that and do like a full U-turn. So it'll be like this. And then the opposite of that is if you roll the opposite way of your turn and you always yaw the same direction as your turn no matter which you turn, but that'll basically be your attack turn where you keep your crosshair on the target as you turn. So we'll do it right here. So you go to do your J turn, but you roll the opposite way, and that will basically bring you away from the target as you come out of the turn too. And then say I want to keep my crosshair on this building as I turn around it. That's basically what I'm doing right here. And that way you can kind of attack it as you go. That's also going to lead into orbiting buildings and targets, which is a very, very important skill to have, mostly with the attack helicopter and with the little bird coming up. This is essential when you're dogfighting enemy helicopters or trying to lock onto tanks or attack tanks or infantry or any of that stuff. Just super, super important to know. So you should be able to orbit a building without taking your crosshair off of it eventually. That's going to help you a lot in a lot of circumstances. So I would just practice that. Just find a target, try to keep your crosshair on it, and just keep orbiting it in both directions. That's going to be really important to know. One skill that's extremely important with all 3 helicopters is going to be flying close to the ground, or nap of the earth is what it's technically called. So my main tip for this is to use your pitch to keep you close to the ground or higher if you need to go higher. You don't need to be kissing dirt, like flying 1 meter above the ground, even though I do that a lot of the time just to flex or just to hide myself even more. But if you're like 10 meters off the ground, keeping that consistently, that's a really good starting point. I would work for that first. And then if you're getting more comfortable, you can fly like 1 or 2 meters off the ground eventually, and it'll become more natural the more you do it. It's just basically all practice, but it's really important to be able to at least fly like 10 meters or lower, just so you can avoid getting locked onto and stuff. I'm also holding the throttle the entire time. That's just going to make you go faster. And again, it's all about just adjusting your pitch to keep yourself from touching the ground. Now, as you get more and more comfortable flying the helicopters, you'll be able to do crazier and crazier stuff, obviously, like weaving between buildings and, flying underneath crazy stuff. One thing you just always need to keep in the back of your mind is the RPGs in this game are absolutely insane, and they basically have no lead time, and they have insane velocity. You will get shot down by RPGs quite a bit flying low and crazily. Like, you could never crash the helicopter, but you'll still get RPG'd. So just keep that in the back of your head. But another thing that I have for you, if you're going to fly under stuff, your tail rotor is a lot higher than the rest of the helicopter. So you'll have to fly lower than it looks to get underneath stuff. Like if I try to fly through this at this height, I'll hit the tail rotor. Watch, yep. So just keep that in mind. That'll like either blow you up or just stop you completely in your tracks, and you're just free real estate at that point. But if you're not doing stupid stuff like that, you got nothing to worry about. I will say the lower you fly to the ground, the higher chance that missile that is chasing you will hit the terrain rather than you. So it can be pretty helpful to fly as low as you possibly can without crashing. It's also fun to just aura farm. I'll be honest, I do it a lot of the time in the transport helicopter just because you get really cool reactions from people doing it. I think that's super fun. I also think it makes it fun for other people to see you doing that kind of stuff. Like, people get really hyped seeing that kind of stuff, so it makes it fun for both you and them. It also just makes it more fun to fly in general. Like, I have a lot more fun flying low and crazily around the map. It just makes it, like, more skillful and just more enjoyable, I guess you could say. But just remember, RPGs and tail rotor, those two things, if you're flying low and under stuff, they will get you if you're not paying attention. Well, RPGs, it doesn't really matter if you're paying attention. They'll just get you. And that is everything in my ultimate helicopter guide for Battlefield 6. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry this took a long time. They nerfed the attack helicopter twice in the middle of me recording this video, so I had to go back and redo a whole bunch of it 2 different times. And then I've also been extremely busy, had a lot of things going on in life, so happy to finally get it out. Hopefully it was worth the wait for you guys if you ended up watching my other video. And appreciate you guys watching. As always, catch you in the next one. Peace out.